Welcome to Creepy Mysteries. Before moving to the story, I just want to take a moment. Every story here is crafted to take you on a spine-chilling journey. If you enjoy what you hear and want more tales of the unknown, consider subscribing to the channel. It truly means the world to us. And if this story intrigued you, let us know by liking the video and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Your feedback helps us uncover even more mysteries to share with you. Now let's move on to the story. It was well past midnight when I finally decided to call it a day. The rain poured relentlessly, making the streets shimmer under dim, flickering streetlights. I had spent the entire evening working late, and exhaustion weighed heavy on my body. My phone buzzed. "Your ride is arriving in 3 minutes. Black SUV. License plate 84L27. The car pulled up, sleek and black, just as the app described. The driver rolled down the window slightly, revealing a man in his late 40s with a polite but subdued smile. His eyes lingered on me for a moment too long. "Alina, right?" he asked. "Yes," I replied, hesitating for just a moment before stepping in. The interior smelled faintly of bleach. The leather seats were cold, and the only sound was the rhythmic tapping of rain against the windows. Something about the silence felt wrong. I shrugged it off, blaming my overworked mind. The ride began smoothly, the soft hum of the engine almost lulling me to sleep. But a few minutes in, I noticed something strange. The app's GPS wasn't matching the route he was taking. The blue line veered left, but the car turned right. "Excuse me," I said, leaning forward, "I think you missed the turn." The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. His polite smile was gone. "Shortcut," he muttered, his voice monotone. A chill ran down my spine. "I'd prefer to stick to the main road," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't answer. Instead, he adjusted the rearview mirror so I could see his eyes fixed on me. The rain outside grew heavier, turning into a deafening roar. The car turned onto a narrow, unlit road surrounded by dense woods. My heartbeat quickened. "This doesn't look like a shortcut," I said, my voice now trembling. Still no response. I reached for the door handle, testing it discreetly. Locked. The child lock was engaged. My pulse pounded in my ears. "Where are you taking me?" I demanded, my voice rising. The driver chuckled softly. It wasn't the kind of laugh that reassured you. It was the kind that made your skin crawl. "Don't worry," he said, his voice unnervingly calm. "We're almost there." "Almost where?" The car slowed, pulling onto a gravel path deep in the woods. My breath hitched as I saw faint figures in the distance, illuminated by the car's headlights. 3 people, all wearing dark clothes and featureless white masks, stood motionless in the rain. Panic surged. "Let me out!" I screamed, banging on the window. The driver didn't even flinch. He stopped the car and turned to me, his eyes cold and empty. "It's nothing personal, Alina. You're just the one they chose tonight." Before I could process his words, he reached into the passenger seat and grabbed a roll of duct tape. Adrenaline kicked in. I fumbled through my bag, my fingers closing around a pen. As he leaned closer, I jabbed the pen into his arm with all my strength. He screamed, dropping the tape. The masked figures began moving toward the car. I could hear their footsteps crunching on the gravel, growing louder with each passing second. I scrambled into the front seat, my hands shaking as I searched for the unlock button. The driver lunged at me, his bloodied arm grabbing my shoulder. I twisted away, slamming my elbow into his face. The door unlocked. I threw it open and stumbled out into the rain. The woods were pitch black, the towering trees blocking out the moonlight. The masked figures were closing in, their heavy footsteps sloshing through the mud. My breath came in short, panicked gasps as I sprinted deeper into the forest. Branches clawed at my skin, and the rain soaked me to the bone. I could hear them behind me, their eerie, synchronized whispers cutting through the storm. "Don't run, Alina," one voice called, almost sing-song. Another voice, deeper and more menacing, added, You can't hide forever. I tripped over a root and hit the ground hard. Pain shot through my ankle as I tried to get up. The figures were closer now, their white masks glowing faintly in the dark. Desperate, I spotted an old, dilapidated cabin through the trees. Limping as fast as I could, I made my way to the door and pushed it open. The inside was worse than the outside, dusty furniture, broken windows, and strange symbols carved into the walls. I locked the door and backed away, clutching a rusted metal pipe I found on the floor. The whispers surrounded the cabin now, growing louder. The doorknob rattled. Then, the banging started. I pressed myself against the far wall, my heart pounding. The banging stopped abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence. Then, I heard it. A soft, wet sound behind me. I turned slowly, the pipe trembling in my hands. In the corner of the room, crouched on all fours, was the driver. His face was twisted into a grotesque grin, his eyes black as night. "You shouldn't have run," he hissed, his voice distorted and inhuman. My breath hitched as I stared at the driver crouched in the corner, his grotesque grin twisting his face into something inhuman. His black eyes bore into mine as if savoring my fear. "You shouldn't have run," he hissed, his voice echoing unnaturally in the small cabin. I gripped the rusted pipe tighter, backing away toward the door. My heart was pounding so loudly I thought it might drown out the sound of his slow, deliberate steps as he crawled toward me. "You won't leave," he whispered, his voice crawling under my skin. "They don't let anyone leave." With a burst of adrenaline, I swung the pipe at him, the sound of the impact reverberating in the cabin as he crumpled to the ground. I didn't wait to see if he was unconscious. I unlocked the door and bolted into the storm, my injured ankle screaming in protest. The masked figures were still outside, their eerie whispers cutting through the sound of rain. I spotted a narrow path leading away from the cabin and ran, the mud pulling at my shoes with every step. I didn't look back. I couldn't. After what felt like an eternity, I stumbled onto a paved road, nearly collapsing in relief. My legs ached, and my lungs burned, but I kept moving, desperate to put as much distance as possible between me and that nightmare. Headlights appeared in the distance. I waved frantically, hoping whoever it was would stop. The car slowed, and an elderly man rolled down the window. "Are you okay?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "Please, just drive." I gasped, climbing into the car. "I'll explain everything later." He nodded, sensing the urgency in my voice, and sped off. As the cabin disappeared in the rearview mirror, I felt a glimmer of safety for the first time. But the nightmare wasn't over. As the man drove, I noticed his radio flickering with static. A faint, distorted voice came through, "She escaped. Find her." The man didn't seem to notice, but my blood ran cold. I turned to look out the back window, half expecting to see the masked figures chasing us. Instead, I saw something far worse. The driver from the rideshare stood in the middle of the road, his inhuman grin glowing in the darkness. His mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear, but I knew he was speaking directly to me. My escape wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. I reported everything to the police, but they found nothing, no cabin, no masked figures, no sign of the driver. Weeks later, strange things began happening. Unfamiliar cars parked outside my home. Random knocks at my door in the middle of the night. Whispers in the dark. They hadn't forgotten me. And I knew they would come back. It was one of those foggy nights where the world felt suffocatingly small. I had just left the party with Mia, Claire, Jake, Ethan, and Lily. The music was still pounding in my head as we walked down the empty streets, our laughter echoing too loudly in the quiet night. Mia, as always, was the center of attention. She walked ahead, her voice cutting through the fog. "You know," she said, turning to face us, "this night would have been perfect if you all didn't have secrets." We all froze. Her words hit harder than they should have, each of us suddenly hyper-aware of what we were hiding. "Don't start, Mia," I said, trying to keep the mood light. Let's just get home. She laughed, but it wasn't her usual laugh. It was sharp, bitter. Oh, don't worry, I'll get home. The question is, will you? Her words sent a chill down my spine. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. Mia was missing. The police showed up at school, asking questions. Sitting in the interrogation room, I tried to keep my story straight. She was acting strange, I admitted. She seemed angry at all of us. The detective leaned forward. Angry about what? I hesitated. I don't know. She didn't say. But that was a lie. Mia had said something I couldn't bring myself to repeat. She looked right at me before she disappeared and whispered, "You should have told them the truth." Over the next week, the group started to fall apart. None of us talked about Mia, but the weight of her absence pressed down on everything. Every glance felt accusatory, every word drenched in guilt. The air between us was electric with unspoken truths, and the cracks in our friendship began to show. The first to break was Claire. She stopped sitting with us at lunch, instead burying herself in her phone, her eyes red from crying. One afternoon, I caught her in the library, trembling as she scrolled through an old photo of Mia. "Claire, are you okay?" I asked. She flinched, quickly locking her phone. I just miss her," she whispered. But her voice wavered, and I noticed how her hands wouldn't stop shaking. "You know something, don't you?" I pressed. Her eyes darted around the room before she hissed, "I wasn't the last one to see her. Jake was." My stomach churned. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then leaned in. "At the party, I saw them fighting in the kitchen." She slapped him, and he grabbed her arm. I didn't think much of it at the time, but what if something happened? Later that night, I confronted Jake. He was in the gym, pounding a punching bag with more force than necessary. Sweat dripped from his brow, and his jaw was clenched so tightly it looked like it might snap. "Jake," I started, unsure of how to broach the subject, "what happened with Mia at the party?" He stopped mid-punch, his knuckles white against the bag. "What are you talking about?" "Claire said she saw you two arguing." Jake's face darkened. "So what?" "We argued all the time. She had a way of getting under your skin, you know." "That doesn't mean you." He turned on me, his eyes blazing. "Don't finish that sentence." "I didn't do anything to her." But his reaction only made me more suspicious. His voice shook, not with anger, but with something else, fear. Then there was Ethan. Quiet, calm Ethan, who rarely said more than a few words at a time. He started skipping school, avoiding everyone. When I finally cornered him outside his house, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Ethan, what's going on?" I asked. He looked past me, his gaze unfocused. "She's in my head," he mumbled. "What?" "She won't leave me alone. I hear her, at night. She keeps saying it was my fault." A chill ran down my spine. "What was your fault?" Ethan's eyes finally met mine, glassy and haunted. "I saw her leave that night. I should have gone after her, but I didn't. She looked so mad, and I thought she needed space. But she wasn't alone. By the end of the week, I felt like I was losing my mind. Every corner I turned, I thought I saw her. Every time the wind blew, I swore I heard her voice. Then Lily called me. Her voice was shaking so badly I could barely understand her. "She's here," Lily whispered. "Who's there?" "Mia. She's in my room." I froze. "What are you talking about?" "She's mad at us," Lily sobbed. "I can feel it. Last night, I heard her humming. You remember that stupid song she always sang? And then she whispered my name. Lily, it's just your mind playing tricks on you." "No. It's real. She's real." The line went dead. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt too quiet, the kind of silence that makes every sound seem louder. At 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of faint humming. My blood turned cold. I crept to my bedroom door and opened it, half expecting to see Mia standing there. But the hallway was empty. I slowly walked toward the kitchen, the humming growing louder. Then, just as I reached the doorway, it stopped. My phone buzzed in my pocket, startling me. It was a text from an unknown number. 3 words. "You should have stopped it." I stared at the screen, my heart hammering. And then I heard it again, her voice, soft and accusing, right behind me. "Why didn't you stop it?" I spun around, but no one was there. Only the faint outline of a handprint on the fogged-up kitchen window. The group was unraveling. The guilt, the lies, and now the terrifying signs of Mia's presence were driving us to the edge. We avoided each other, yet we were bound by the secret. The next time we met was unplanned. Jake called us all to an old park on the outskirts of town. It was the same park where we used to hang out as kids. When I arrived, everyone was already there, standing in tense silence under the dim glow of a street lamp. Jake broke the silence. "We need to talk about that night." Ethan flinched. "What about it? You all think I did something to her, don't you?" Jake's voice cracked. "Well, I didn't. But someone here did, and we're not leaving until we figure out who." Claire hugged herself tightly. "I saw you two arguing, Jake. You grabbed her." "I grabbed her arm because she was storming off," he shouted. "She was drunk, and I didn't want her walking alone. She slapped me and said she didn't need my help. So I let her go." "She was drunk, and you let her walk into the woods alone?" Lily snapped, tears streaming down her face. Jake's fists clenched. "What was I supposed to do? She didn't want me there." "I saw her too," Ethan said quietly. His voice was barely audible. "She walked into the woods, but she wasn't alone." We all turned to him. "What do you mean?" I asked. "There was someone else," Ethan said, his face pale. "A shadow, following her." The tension in the group was unbearable. The cracks in our stories were becoming impossible to ignore. I need to tell you something," Claire said, her voice trembling. "That night, I texted Mia. I told her she was selfish, that she always made everything about her. I told her I hated her." She broke down into sobs. "You think that's bad?" Lily said, her voice shaking. "I knew she was drunk. I knew she was upset. But when she called me, I ignored her. I let it go to voicemail." "She called me too," Ethan admitted. "I was scared. I thought she was going to ask me to walk her home, and I didn't want to get involved." All eyes turned to me. I felt the weight of their stares, the memories of that night crashing over me. "I saw her," I confessed, my voice barely a whisper. "After Jake let her go, I followed her. She was crying, and I wanted to help, but we argued. She said she didn't trust me, that none of us were real friends." My voice cracked. "She ran off, and I didn't go after her." A heavy silence fell over the group. "We all failed her," Jake finally said. "But it doesn't explain this." He gestured to the eerie signs we'd all experienced, the whispers, the texts, the shadows. That night, we decided to return to the woods where Mia had disappeared. Armed with flashlights and our frayed nerves, we retraced our steps from that fateful night. The forest was unnervingly quiet, the air thick with tension. We stopped when we reached the clearing where Ethan had last seen her. The ground was soft and damp, and the fog clung to the trees like a shroud. "That's where I saw the shadow," Ethan whispered, pointing to a patch of earth near a tree. As we approached, Lily let out a gasp. Half buried in the dirt was Mia's phone, its screen shattered, but still faintly glowing. Next to it was a bracelet she always wore. Suddenly, the air grew cold. A faint hum filled the clearing, growing louder until it became a voice. "Why didn't you stop it?" We froze as Mia's voice echoed around us. A shadowy figure emerged from the fog, her outline unmistakable. It was Mia, but not the Mia we remembered. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow, and her presence radiated cold fury. "You left me," she said, her voice laced with pain. "You all left me." "We're sorry," Claire sobbed. "We didn't mean. Sorry won't bring me back." The ground beneath us began to shake, and the fog thickened. The shadow that Ethan had seen loomed behind Mia, its form dark and menacing. "We didn't kill you," Jake shouted. "It wasn't us." Mia's expression shifted. For a moment, there was sadness. "No," she said, her voice softening. "But you let it happen." The shadow moved closer, and Mia whispered one final warning, "He's coming for you next." The lights on our flashlights flickered and we just ran away from there, didn't even look back for once. We never spoke about what happened in the woods that night. The police found Mia's body a week later, confirming she had fallen and hit her head. But we knew the truth. Mia wasn't at peace. And whoever, or whatever, had been with her that night wasn't finished with us. Even now, years later, I sometimes hear her voice in the dead of night. A faint whisper in the dark. "You could have stopped it."